First story, The Midnight Encounter by Mark Turner. It was a moonless night in the quiet countryside of Iowa. I was on a solo hiking trip, hoping to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The only source of illumination was the dim light of my flashlight, guiding my path through the dense forest. The silence was almost deafening, save for the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. As I continued deeper into the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I chalked it up to paranoia, but my instincts told me otherwise. The dense canopy overhead seemed to swallow all sound, making me acutely aware of every footfall, every breath. I had been hiking for hours when I finally stumbled upon a clearing. In the middle of it stood a rickety, old cabin. It was peculiar, considering I hadn't come across any signs of civilization during my hike. My curiosity got the best of me, and I cautiously approached the cabin. The wooden structure was weathered and worn, like it had been abandoned for years. As I got closer, a chilling wind picked up, howling through the trees. I shivered and knocked on the door, thinking perhaps a hermit or a lost soul might be dwelling within. There was no answer, only the eerie creaking of the cabin in response to my knock. I pushed the door open, and it revealed a single room, dimly lit by a flickering candle. The cabin was empty, but a strange painting hung on the wall. It depicted a scene from the forest, eerily similar to the clearing outside. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't help but feel that the painting was watching me. Just as I was about to make a hasty exit, I heard a noise from behind the cabin. I stepped outside and ventured around back, where I saw a man standing by a shallow grave, shovel in hand. The moonlight illuminated his face, revealing a twisted grin. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward. "What are you doing?" I stammered. The man's eyes locked onto mine, and he dropped the shovel. "Just digging a hole for some company," he replied in a chillingly casual tone. With a surge of panic, I turned and sprinted back into the forest. Branches clawed at me, and the inky blackness seemed to swallow me whole. I didn't dare look back, and I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my car. I don't know what I stumbled upon that night in the Iowa countryside, but I do know that I narrowly escaped a chilling encounter that still haunts my dreams. Second story, The Unwelcome Campfire by Sarah Matthews. It was a crisp autumn evening, and my friends and I decided to go camping in the remote woods of upstate New York. We had heard stories of the area being haunted, but we were skeptical and considered it mere folklore. Little did we know, we were in for a night that would change our beliefs forever. We had set up our campsite near a small, tranquil river and decided to light a campfire to chase away the growing chill. As the flames danced in the darkness, our laughter and chatter filled the air. The forest seemed alive with the crackling fire and the occasional rustling of leaves. But then, we heard something that made our hearts drop. It started as a distant, low hum, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. But it grew louder and more distinct, like a chorus of voices murmuring incoherently. The eerie sound sent shivers down our spines, and we huddled closer together. As we strained our ears to decipher the words, the sound began to take on a rhythm, almost like a chant. It was as if a group of people were gathered in the darkness, conducting a ritual we were never meant to witness. Fear gripped us, and we contemplated packing up and leaving. Just then, we noticed a faint glow through the trees, further downstream. The chanting seemed to be emanating from that direction. We couldn't resist our curiosity and decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights, we crept closer to the mysterious light. As we got closer, we saw a circle of hooded figures standing around a blazing bonfire. They chanted in an unknown language, their voices rising and falling in a disturbing cadence. Their ritual was unsettling, and we had stumbled upon something we should have never witnessed. The figures noticed our presence and abruptly fell silent. They turned to face us, their eyes hidden beneath their hoods. We couldn't make out any faces, but we felt their gazes upon us. Fear coursed through our veins as we realized that we were intruding on something beyond our understanding. One of the figures stepped forward, a long, bony finger beckoning us to come closer. We couldn't move, paralyzed by both terror and curiosity. The chanting resumed, growing louder and more intense. It was as if the forest itself was alive with their unnatural chorus. As the figure moved closer, we finally found the strength to flee. We sprinted back to our campsite, abandoning our gear in our haste to escape. The chanting and the eerie glow faded into the distance, but we didn't stop until we reached the safety of our car. To this day, we don't know who or what those hooded figures were, but we were forever changed by that night in the remote woods of upstate New York. Third story, The Whispering Pines by James Mitchell. Nestled deep within the forests of Oregon, my friends and I embarked on a backpacking trip, seeking the solitude that only nature can provide. Little did we know that the whispers of the forest would send chills down our spines. Our campsite was beside a serene lake, surrounded by towering pine trees. The clear night sky above was adorned with a brilliant display of stars. We settled in around the campfire, sharing stories and laughter as the forest rustled with life around us. As the night wore on, a strange phenomenon occurred. The pine trees that encircled our campsite began to emit a low, eerie hum. It was a sound unlike anything we had ever heard before, resonating through the forest like a haunting melody. The whispers seemed to emanate from the very heart of the trees. Curiosity got the better of us, and we approached the closest pine tree, placing our hands on its rough bark. The sound became more pronounced, as if the tree itself was trying to communicate with us. It was as though the forest had a voice, and it wanted to share its secrets. The whispers grew more distinct, and they were in English. We strained to make out the words, and it was as if the forest was telling us a story of tragedy, death, and despair. The voices were filled with sorrow, and we couldn't understand how trees could produce such sounds. Terrified but inexplicably drawn to the trees, we moved closer, attempting to decipher the source of the mysterious whispers. It was then that we noticed a strange carving on one of the pine trees. It was a name and a date, etched into the wood as if by an unseen hand. The name was Emily, and the date was over a century old. The whispers grew more intense, as if Emily herself were trying to convey her anguish. It was a tragedy that had unfolded in this forest long ago, a story of love lost and a life cut short. As we stood there, the pine trees seemed to come alive, their branches quivering and leaves rustling. The whispers filled the night, and it felt as if Emily's presence was all around us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on her world, and it was a world of sorrow and regret. Overcome with fear, we fled the campsite, leaving behind our gear. The whispers followed us as we made our way back to civilization, echoing in our minds long after we had left the haunted forest. To this day, we can't explain the origin of those whispers, but the memory of that night in the Oregon wilderness still sends shivers down our spines. Fourth story, The Trespassers by Alex Thompson. I had always found solace in the remote cabin in the heart of rural Kentucky, a place my family had owned for generations. Surrounded by dense forests and nestled near a serene lake, it was a haven of peace and tranquility. This weekend, I had chosen to spend a few quiet days alone at the cabin, far away from the bustle of city life. As night fell, the forest outside cast eerie shadows, and the only source of light was the dim glow of my lantern. The forest was silent, save for the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I had always loved the solitude the woods offered, but that night it would prove to be more unsettling than peaceful. I was seated by the fireplace, lost in the warmth and flickering flames, when I heard it, the distant rumble of an engine. My heart quickened, and I strained to listen. There it was again, unmistakable this time, the crunch of gravel on the cabin's driveway. I moved closer to the window and peered out. 3 shadowy figures approached the cabin, flashlights in hand. Their steps were purposeful, and their intentions were clear. They were not here for a friendly visit. Fear gripped my heart as they began trying to force their way inside. I watched with bated breath, knowing I had to take action. With a sense of urgency, I crept towards the back of the cabin, where my grandfather's old shotgun leaned against the wall. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers trembling as I grabbed the weapon. It was a family heirloom, worn and weathered, but it still held the promise of protection. The intruders were now at the front door, working to pick the lock. I stepped out onto the porch, my heart pounding in my chest, the shotgun leveled at them. The sudden appearance of an armed resident caught them off guard. They turned to face me, their faces hidden beneath dark hoodies. Without a word, they fled into the night, disappearing into the dense forest. Their footfalls echoed into the distance, and I didn't dare follow. As silence returned to the cabin, I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. Who were those intruders, and what had they intended to do? I never found the answers to those questions, but that eerie encounter in the Kentucky woods left me shaken, and I couldn't help but wonder what could have transpired that night. 5th story, The Hidden Cave by Rachel Bennett. My journey took me to the rugged wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains in Tennessee. The untamed beauty of the terrain had always captivated me, and I had chosen to embark on a solo hike, guided only by the soft glow of my lantern. The woods were dense, and the night was dark, but I felt a sense of exhilaration as I ventured further into the wilderness. The forest was a symphony of nocturnal sounds, and the path I followed was rugged, but I felt at home among the trees. It was then that I stumbled upon a hidden cave entrance, camouflaged by the overgrowth of the forest. The entrance beckoned to me, a mysterious call that I couldn't resist. I knew it was risky, but my curiosity got the better of me. As I ventured deeper into the cave, a growing sense of unease settled over me. The walls closed in, and the silence was oppressive. The only sound was the echoing drip of water in the darkness. It was as if the cave itself was alive, watching and waiting. In the depths of the cave, I discovered an eerie sight that sent shivers down my spine, an altar adorned with strange symbols and candles, flickering with an otherworldly light. It was a chilling sight, and I realized that I had stumbled upon a place of dark significance. The cave seemed to be a gathering point for those who sought to tap into something otherworldly, something beyond human understanding. I felt like an intruder in a sacred place, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. As I turned to leave, a bone-chilling whisper echoed through the cave. It was as if the very walls were speaking to me. I strained to make out the words, but they were incomprehensible, a language or dialect I had never heard before. Panic overcame me, and I stumbled out of the cave, leaving the altar and its eerie whispers behind. The memories of that chilling encounter haunted me, and I knew I had come face to face with something beyond the ordinary. Sixth story, The Abandoned Village by Daniel Carter. My journey took me to the rolling hills of the Welsh countryside, where I embarked on a hike that would lead me to an abandoned village with a chilling history. The beauty of the lush landscapes and the quaint cottages were juxtaposed by a sense of dread that settled in as I explored. The village appeared deserted, with cobblestone streets overgrown with weeds and the houses showing signs of decay. I ventured into one of the cottages, and what I found inside sent shivers down my spine. The rooms were filled with old, rotting furniture, cobwebs covering every surface as if the inhabitants had vanished without a trace. As I continued my exploration, I heard faint, ghostly laughter in the distance. It was as if the spirits of the past were still present, playing tricks on the living. I felt like an intruder in a place I was never meant to be, disturbing the slumber of something beyond the grave. The laughter grew louder and more distinct, echoing through the empty streets. It was a chilling reminder that I was not alone in that village, and the spirits of the past were watching me. To this day, I can't explain the purpose of that abandoned village in the Welsh countryside, but I know that I had come face to face with something that defied the laws of the living, something that still haunts my dreams. Seventh story, The Silent Campground by Emily Wilson. I had chosen a camping trip to escape the noisy city life and reconnect with nature. The setting was a secluded campground in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York, and the promise of solitude was exactly what I craved. Little did I know that the silence of the woods would become more unnerving than any city noise. As I pitched my tent by the tranquil lake, I felt an unusual stillness in the air. The sun had set, and the only source of illumination was my flickering campfire. The woods around me were unusually quiet, devoid of the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures. That stillness was eerie, and it made me hyper-aware of every rustle in the bushes and every crack of a branch. The solitude I had sought began to feel oppressive, like an invisible weight on my shoulders. As the night wore on, I heard something that sent shivers down my spine. A low, haunting melody began to fill the air, a mournful tune that seemed to seep from the very earth itself. It was as if the forest was singing a dirge, and I was the unwilling audience. The melody grew louder and more distinct, and it was accompanied by whispers in a language I couldn't understand. The words were eerie, and they seemed to be coming from all around me, as if the very trees were trying to communicate. Fear gnawed at me, but I couldn't pinpoint the source of the sounds. It was then that I noticed a nearby tree with a peculiar carving, an elaborate symbol etched into the bark. It looked ancient and foreboding, and it pulsed with an otherworldly light. The symbol seemed to be the epicenter of the eerie sounds, and I realized that I had stumbled upon something beyond my comprehension. The forest itself felt alive with an unsettling presence, and I knew I was trespassing in a place I should not be. With a mounting sense of dread, I hastily packed up my camp and left the campground, the haunting melody and whispers still echoing in my ears. I never understood the origin of those sounds or the purpose of the symbol on the tree, but the memory of that night in the Adirondack Mountains still sends shivers down my spine. Eighth story, The Phantom Musician by Thomas Rogers. In the rural countryside of Bavaria, Germany, I found myself on a hike through the picturesque Black Forest. The lush, dense woods were known for their beauty and tranquility, but on this particular day, I encountered an unsettling phenomenon that would forever change my perspective on the natural world. I was hiking alone, and the forest was shrouded in the twilight of evening. The shadows cast by the towering trees seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of pine, and the only sounds were my footsteps on the leaf-strewn trail. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the eerie silence was broken by a distant, haunting melody. It was a violin, its melancholic notes resonating through the woods. The music was beautiful but inexplicable. I couldn't fathom who would be playing such a haunting tune in the heart of the forest. The melody grew louder and more distinct, leading me off the beaten path, like an enchanting siren's call. I followed it, guided by an irresistible urge. The music led me to a small clearing, and there, I saw her, a young woman dressed in a tattered gown, her fingers moving deftly across the strings of a violin. She played with a mournful intensity, her eyes distant, as if lost in a world of her own. I couldn't tear my gaze away from her, and the beauty of the music seemed to transcend reality. It was as if she had harnessed the very soul of the forest and channeled it through her music. But as the melody reached its climax, the woman's face contorted in agony. The notes turned dissonant and haunting, as if she was bearing a heavy burden. Her fingers moved frantically, and her music became an anguished cry of despair. In that moment, the very ground beneath me seemed to tremble, and the trees swayed as if in anguish. The forest itself had responded to the woman's pain, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I knew I had encountered something beyond human understanding. With a heavy heart, I left the clearing, the haunting music still ringing in my ears. I never learned who the woman was or why she played that sorrowful tune, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had come face to face with a force of nature that was far more powerful and enigmatic than I could comprehend. Ninth story, The Ghostly Noises by Sarah Mitchell. I found myself in the heart of the rural English countryside, exploring the scenic hills of the Cotswolds. The rolling landscapes and quaint villages promised a serene escape from the chaos of city life. Little did I know that I would encounter a chilling mystery that would leave me questioning the very fabric of reality. I had decided to spend the night in a centuries-old cottage nestled in the countryside. The thatched roof and wooden beams exuded history and charm, and I settled in for a cozy evening. But as night fell, I couldn't escape the sensation that I was not alone. As I lay in bed, an eerie sound filled the air. It was the faint, distant laughter of children, echoing through the cottage as if they were playing just beyond my door. The laughter was playful, yet it was tinged with an unsettling quality, like the ghostly remnants of joy from long ago. I dismissed the sounds as mere creaking of the old house, but as the night wore on, the laughter grew louder and more distinct. It was as if a group of children were playing games in the darkness. Their giggles and footsteps seemed to draw closer, and I was paralyzed with fear. The bedroom door slowly creaked open, revealing a chilling sight. The room was bathed in a pale, ethereal light, and a group of children stood at the threshold. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces pale and their eyes vacant. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The children didn't acknowledge my presence. They simply stood there, their eerie laughter still filling the room. It was as if they existed in a different plane of reality, a glimpse into the past. With a surge of courage, I called out to them, but they remained silent and unresponsive. Panic welled up within me, and I fled the room, not daring to look back. The cottage was empty, and the laughter had ceased. I couldn't explain the source of those ghostly noises, but the memory of that night in the Cotswolds haunted me, leaving me with a deep sense of unease. 10th story, The Haunting Echoes by Patrick O'Sullivan. My journey took me to the quiet countryside of County Kerry, Ireland, where the rolling green hills and picturesque villages beckoned to my wandering soul. I had chosen to spend a night in a centuries-old Irish cottage, eager to experience the timeless beauty and tranquility of the countryside. Little did I know that I would encounter a mysterious phenomenon that defied all rational explanation. The cottage was quaint and charming, with a thatched roof and ivy-covered stone walls. As night fell, I lit a cozy fire in the hearth and settled into a comfortable armchair. The room was bathed in the soft, warm light of the fire, and I felt at peace. But as I relaxed, an unsettling sensation settled in. The room was silent, too silent for comfort. I couldn't escape the eerie feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were fixed upon me. It was as if the very walls of the cottage held a hidden secret. The silence was broken by a faint, distant sound, the gentle strumming of a harp. The music was beautiful and haunting, as if it carried the soul of Ireland itself. The notes hung in the air, ethereal and melancholic, and they tugged at my heartstrings. I followed the sound to a room at the end of a narrow hallway. The door was ajar, and the room was bathed in a ghostly, silvery light. There, I saw a young woman, dressed in a flowing, white gown, her fingers gracefully plucking the strings of a harp. The woman was a vision of beauty, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. She played with a mournful intensity, as if the very soul of Ireland's history flowed through her music. The notes were a haunting lament, carrying the echoes of a distant past. I couldn't tear my gaze away from her, and I was drawn into the melancholic melody. The room seemed to vibrate with the haunting music, and the walls appeared to ripple as if they were alive. But as the music reached its climax, the woman's face contorted in anguish. The harp's notes turned dissonant and heart-wrenching, and the room seemed to pulse with her pain. It was as if the very walls were weeping. Overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience, I fled the room and left the cottage, the haunting echoes of the harp music still ringing in my ears. I never discovered the identity of the woman or the source of the mysterious phenomenon, but the memory of that night in County Kerry haunted me, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had witnessed a glimpse of Ireland's ancient, troubled soul. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole video. Also, I recommend you this video you see on screen, one of the scariest on my channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This helps me bring you more thrilling content every day. If this video sent shivers down your spine, let me know in the comments.